And that is going to be the topic of our conversation today with Todd Francis from Shasta Ventures. I have known Todd for a long, long time, so it's a great pleasure to have you here, Todd. One of the first, actually, consumer perspective person in the history of venture capital. There were very few. When we started this whole internet industry, the dot-com bubble and everything, it was techies, dabbling in consumer. And Todd was a refreshing exception. And since then, of course, Todd has had a successful career in venture capital. He started at Trinity Ventures and since then went on to found Shasta Ventures with a couple of other quite senior people in the industry. So Todd, welcome.
Well, thanks for having me.
I think the best question to start us out with would be, what do you see has happened to the e-commerce business since the 90s?
Yeah, so if I could maybe even go back a bit further and provide perspective on retail in general and commerce,
sure.
Because I think as an entrepreneur, it'd be easy to sit there and think, oh, is it over? Like, has everything been done? Has every category been covered already? And I think it's important that entrepreneurs realize consumers are always ready for a new and better offering. If you go back even in the early days of retail, we had the shoe store, and we had the shirt store, and we had the dress store. We had all these specialty stores. Then we saw the innovation of department stores. Then we saw the innovation of low-priced, the Walmarts and Kmarts of the world. And then, interestingly, we saw specialty stores come back with an interesting twist, with more knowledge about customers and more knowledge about the products they sold, like a Pottery Barn, for example, or kitchen stores. And so we see these cycles even in the mall. And so I always like to use the analogy of the mall because the mall is always ready for something new. Consumers are always interested in a new concept. So let's look at e-commerce. In the mid to late 90s when the internet got going, there weren't a lot of people online, but those who were benefited from the early plays. The early plays were, for example, we were involved with Blue Nile, and then you saw, and basically the play there was, let's bring in a set of products that are hard to access, bring them all into one place, offer them on one site, kind of a vertical play at a decent price. So we saw plays like Blue Nile and Amazon, and then specialty stores like backcountry.com start to evolve. And they were mostly selling, at the time, other people's goods. So it was typically, we're assembling an assortment of manufacturers' goods and bringing them to the consumer. And so that was the first wave. And that wave was a really powerful wave because for the first time, if you lived in a rural area, you could access products through UPS and FedEx. So it's really powerful. I don't think we should look back on 1.0 as, wow, what a joke. I think we should look back on it as that was, monumental in providing access to goods worldwide and at a better price. But things have changed a lot, right? Just like in the malls, we saw aggregation of products and pricing variances. We're seeing that online. So Amazon then became, instead of just books, they became the everything store. They became the Walmart, if you will, online. And so that's been interesting, and they've been able to win through price and knowledge about the customer and just so many advantages. So that was kind of moving into the next generation of just doing 1.0 better. But now we're seeing really interesting and exciting evolution with the advantages of following customer interests, of social, connecting with your friends and your social networks, and then also a very exciting new trend, which is vertically integrated direct-to-the-consumer brands, where you're not just selling other people's goods, right? There's a number of players like Bonobos that are, and Warby Parker, that are creating brands direct to the consumer and cutting out the middlemen and providing better price and assortment. So I think the overall view on what's going on in commerce is change, and change is allowing for better experiences, and it's always going to be changing. It's always going to be getting better. So we remain very optimistic about the category.
So one of the things that I'd like to point out, we work with people that are very early stage, right? People who are just getting started, and it's not always viable to start with your own products. So sometimes, and this is where the parallel with the retail business, the department store retail business comes in, every department store, if you look at the P&Ls of department stores, a Macy's or a Saks or Bloomingdale's, they sell other people's brands, and then in the basics categories, they sell their own brand. So you will see the Saks Fifth Avenue Cashmere. That's an incredibly profitable line. I have been in this business, obviously, so I know this inside out. And you know, this is how a lot of people start acquiring customers, building a relationship with customers, and then build their own brand. And on the internet, there's a company that's actually doing a really good job of this. That's Nasty Gal. Sophia Amorosa started as an eBay seller, and she was selling vintage, kind of very sassy vintage clothing, I would say, is the brand positioning. And she started doing that on eBay. Then she built her own e-commerce store with other people's merchandise, and now she's doing her own brand, and it's a $100 million plus business. Now it's venture funded. It did not start off being venture funded. It was a bootstrap business up to quite a while, quite a size actually, before they got venture funding. So what when you are looking at you know, consumer e-commerce brand opportunities, venture scale brand building opportunities, what trends are you seeing in this respect? Like, how are people getting off the ground? Is this dynamic playing out in the deal flow that you are seeing of people who are trying to really scale their brands, but are starting with something that is a multi-store and then going on to building their own brands?
Yeah, it's hard to put everything in one bucket. The reason why is the example you just provided is actually a pretty classic example of a lot of consumer businesses. If someone doing something they're passionate about, they happen to hit a gold mine, or they happen to hit a chord with consumers, and then they start expanding and going out. I don't think, I've never talked to her, I don't think she started out saying, I'm going to build a venture-backed business, so first I'm going to sell on eBay.
Not at all.
Yeah, so my point is, for us to see plans coming in, we aren't typically going to see someone saying, I'm going to first start on eBay and then expand. But I just want to point out, I think those are the most authentic origins of great consumer businesses, which are people do something really, really well for a smaller group of consumers, and they nail it, and then they build the trust, and then they can expand beyond that. I actually feel that is a great way to build a consumer business versus what you might want to call the business plan version, which is, okay, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and you may not be authentic or great or genuine at anything, and consumers want that. They want that kind of, you know, excellence from their providers. So I do think it's a great path. Are a lot of entrepreneurs, you know, starting that way? I think it's something people should really think hard about. I like it when, in other words, I think we see more of the grand business plan idea from entrepreneurs, and it may be better, and we like it when entrepreneurs say, you know what, we're just going to take this one pinpoint, and we're going to go after this one set of customers, and we're going to nail it, and if we nail it, then we get the license to do some other things. And those tend to be the really great authentic brands that build over time. And I think if you look at a lot of the businesses today, they're doing well. They started with those origins.
So when you look at investment opportunities in this specific area where somebody is trying to build a branded e-commerce business, and if they come the first route where they have already been in business, they have some level of traction, and they have some understanding of their customer base, what's their positioning, and why that positioning works, that's actually a kind of more validated business, and you can, my question there would be, what would be the criteria you would apply to gauge whether that is going to be venture scale or not? And then the follow-on question to that would be, when you're looking at these grand business plans where there isn't a lot of that traction. So if someone comes to you with a $5 million business, that's an easier process of checking whether this is going to be venture scale or not. But somebody comes a lot earlier, maybe with a couple of $100,000,
right,
but with a grand business plan, what criteria do you apply? So what we're trying to do is provide our audience a perspective into how a venture capitalist looks at their idea.
So I think the first point is, why do they need any progress at all? Shouldn't a venture firm be willing to back something at the origin? So let's talk about that first, and I'll get to your two stages. The reason we like to see a little bit of progress is multifold. One is consumer businesses are really hard to predict, and it's the execution of the business that allows you to see if that business may have a shot. And so that's point one. Second, it's really, as we all know and we read, it's inexpensive to get a site up and running. It's not that challenging and capital intensive to start moving your business to the customer cycle. So we like to see entrepreneurs who are scrappy enough and can pull that off, because it might only take a couple $100,000 of friends and family funding to get there. So we like to see that initiative and that effort. And then we really like to see what they've learned. So what I like to say is we like to see a full cycle of customer experiences. It doesn't need to be a $5 million business, and it doesn't need to be 100,000 people. But we like to see a customer say, I have a passion for this category, I have a vision for this category, I have sold it to this set of people, I've watched them use it, and now here's what I think the business is. That's what I think for a Series A investor or large seed, it's getting a little fuzzy these days, but the larger round, that's what people resonate to, which is we had an idea, we put it together, we sourced it, we sold it, we've evaluated it, we've watched it, hopefully they've watched it a number of cycles, and now here's where we're going with it. And so what do we look for? We look for that vision and that passion more than anything else. Then as far as metrics, yeah, more metrics are better, right? If you're doing $1 million a month in gross sales, that's better than 50,000. So, but it's not as if there's a minimum at our firm. By the way, a lot of firms do have minimums. So literally say if you're not doing 10 million in revenue, we don't want to talk to you. At our firm and most Series A and early stage firms, it's a combination of the entrepreneur and the vision and the passion with the progress to date and the execution. And so it's, there's going to be trade-offs. We'll back people we know or people we respect with nothing, because we've already seen them do it before. If we don't know the people and they're new to the category, we want to see a little more progress, a little more experience. So I'd say general rule of thumb, for early stage investors, if you're showing $50,000 to $100,000 a month in revenue, you're starting to get in the game of, hey, we're doing this, we're in the business. When you hit $1 million a month in revenue, then you start to become attractive to later, I don't mean later stage, but like the bigger funds or a bigger fundraise. But I want to point out, a lot of these companies are getting funded at very early stages based on great vision and early execution.
So the question that I want to double click down on based on everything you said, we got the stage issue discussed at this point, thrashed out. Where, in the grand spectrum of possibilities, which markets, which segments do you see venture scale brand opportunities in?
Oh, I hate to dodge this question, but my dodge I think is going to be important. I think it's actually hard to sit here and say this category and not that category, because it's about how the entrepreneur sees the execution, how they provide great value to the customer. And I'll give you an example. I think it would have been hard to predict ahead of time that ordering a black car on your iPhone would be a big category, right? But the way that Uber executed, and by the way, that is an example of choosing a smaller category first and then expanding. But the way that they had a maniacal focus on the customer around that first step allowed them to go to the second step, and now we're thinking about it as changing transportation. But it would have been hard in advance to say, well, let's start a way to order limos, right? So it's that entrepreneur vision and execution that was so great, and we've seen that in so many other categories. I actually feel most categories are going to go through tremendous evolution with mobile. So I'd rather put an overlay on that, which is how can mobile change a category? So how can knowing where a customer location is, being able to understand location and past consumer habits affect a category, and then how can new delivery systems change that category? So I'd say every category is up for grabs in that, because we're still at the very early stages of quick delivery. We're at the early stages of geo information to allow retailers and commerce providers to know how to service. So as far as, I think every category could be open, and I'll tell you the things we don't like, the things we maybe don't like is a too strong a word, we're more hesitant on, is we're hesitant on anything that's playing in Amazon's category. And the reason for that is if you're selling other people's goods, so my definition of Amazon is you sell other manufacturers' goods at a low price. It's hard to out-Amazon Amazon. It's hard to out-Walmart, right? So between Amazon and Walmart, depending upon which bucket you're in of a customer, they're doing a hell of a good job sourcing products worldwide and moving them to customers very efficiently. So I wouldn't want to go and just say, let's do hardware.com, right? Because I think that's really well done today. But can you do hardware with a completely different twist, immediate delivery to people on job sites? Can you do it with knowledge of other products that they've already bought and be anticipating the needs of a customer? By the way, we're not looking at hardware and we're not in hardware. I'm just saying, can you do it very, very differently for a precise customer base and nail it better than someone who just offers a wide range of products at a low price? Then that's where the opportunities start to get created. Then you can start to build a brand. Then you can build a defensible business, because you've got to realize anybody who's thinking about this business has to think about Amazon, Walmart, eBay. These are great companies doing a great job in what they do. How can you do something that's different and better? So
there are a couple of threads in that. I think one of the case studies we have in the book is blinds.com.
Okay.
These guys are a very successful top 100 internet retailer, many hundred millions of revenues. I've known this guy for a long, long time, and he has sold the business to Home Depot. So they not only nailed the category that turned out to be quite big, they were able to exit the business to a sizable retailer. So I think that's another path that is happening right now, is a lot of the brick and mortar retailers are starting to acquire successful brands in categories. So that's one example. And the other thought I have listening to you, Todd, is that Amazon, Walmart are very good at commodity products. If you are looking at products that have more differentiation, more of a user experience value or a brand experience value, there's more opportunity to create a differentiated brand experience, which Amazon cannot create.
Yeah. And by the way, on your blinds example, I think I haven't used the site myself personally, but my guess is they do blinds better than anyone else, right?
Absolutely.
Amazon and Home Depot carries this much in blinds. Blinds carries this much and does such a better job. That's an example of taking a category and just anticipating the customer needs, delivering on their needs better than anyone else. And my guess is they ship it faster and it comes, better packaged and all the measurement stuff. It's great. So yeah, I think that, and diapers did that as well, and Zappos did it. So there's definitely ways to pick off these categories, but just make sure you're doing something special in those categories. Make sure you're doing it better.
That's the whole premise of specialty retail. Specialty retail focuses on a specific category and really knocks the ball out of the park in that particular category. That's how you build specialty retail businesses.
Yeah.
And by the way, there's specialty retail, the equivalent of specialty retail, niche e-commerce happening at a grand scale, right? Each of these e-commerce platform vendors have hundreds of thousands of merchants selling. Like Shopify has 200,000 merchants. BigCommerce, which focuses on larger businesses, have 55,000 merchants. So there are like a good 500,000 merchants doing niche e-commerce out there very successfully. A lot of them very successfully. So there's a lot of companies out there that have proved out a category up to a point. They may not be at venture scale, but there's a lot of companies out there that have been able to carve out a niche by doing something somehow.
Yeah, can we just touch on that for a second? I don't think for your audience, you don't need to be venture-backed. Venture-backed, it doesn't need to be the signal of success. There's a lot of great businesses direct to the consumer that you can build and you can own and can be wonderful businesses. And so when you move into the venture-backed model, all of a sudden there's all sorts of new expectations for outcome and scale and whatnot. But you can build a niche business, niche not being negative, niche being specialty, business that can perform extremely well and you can cash flow it. So I think it's always good to point out there's lots of options for entrepreneurs. They don't all have to hit venture requirements.
So the philosophy of the 1M1M program, as you know, is that we support the bootstrap businesses, and that's really what's differentiated about us as a incubation program. In fact, the book is full of these specialty retail companies that are working on niches. There's a guy who, What You Want, this is another eBay seller who went to $6 million with just himself.
Wow.
Selling Panera watches, luxury watches, and then now they're $20 million a year.
That's awesome. Well, I think there's lots of opportunities like that out there.
Yeah, so it's really cool what's the level of opportunities, the diversity of opportunities, the extent of opportunities is very interesting in e-commerce right now. It's very robust because the consumer has really matured. There's very high velocity transactions going on in e-commerce. I want to take your mobile discussion a little bit further and ask you a couple of questions there. So there's the Uber kinds of businesses, right? Uber is, it's kind of, you are in a mobile mode. When you want to get a taxi, you are in a mobile mode. So there is Uber slides into people's natural instincts of buying a taxi experience, taxi ride experience. Yeah. But not all of e-commerce has that characteristic. So this is a question that I've been kind of noodling in my head. I haven't really discussed with anybody, so this is a good opportunity to kind of kick it around a bit. So for example, if I'm actually, today fashion is a big category, and I believe very, very high potential category because it's finally turning and moving to online. If I want to do fashion shopping, honestly, I am absolutely not interested in doing it on my mobile. I want it on my cinema display. I want to have the full, as much information as possible, have as much of a feel for the fabric, everything basically. So, fashion is a gigantic category, and I think it will produce a lot of online brands in due course. And there's actually, people in London who are thinking that, oh, we want to be the online fashion capital of the world. People in New York are thinking the same. People in San Francisco are thinking the same. Right. There's a lot of, people wanting to stake a claim to that, positioning. But what are the drivers of mobile e-commerce? What categories are you seeing that are particularly interesting for mobile e-commerce?
Yeah. So I may surprise you by taking on fashion. So think about not only how you want to see it, but when you're able to see it. So mobile will affect fashion because you're going to have downtime on a bus or in a line or something like that, and fashion is often entertainment, right? Shopping is a lot of entertainment. And so what do you do when you have downtime? You want to be entertained, distracted, and mobile will have a big impact. We actually have real data on this. We're in a company called Threadflip. It's where women can sell clothes out of their own closets to a marketplace. And when we launched the new mobile platform, it just overtook all other platforms. Took over the web dramatically. The mobile experience is by far most productive experience and most effective and efficient and most views and everything. And you think, well, why is that? And that's because people have more time often when they have more downtime when they're mobile, when they're waiting, when they're doing things. And plus, it's just the world we live in. So actually, based on that experience, taking on fashion, which I agree with you, is the hardest test for mobile. I think everything goes mobile. It's hard to imagine, things not going mobile, especially if you consider an iPad or these larger, right? The iPhone 6 Plus now is mobile. That you can see beautiful stuff there. So I actually think entrepreneurs should look at their business and say, how is mobile going to affect my category? Let's flip it around and say, how can I bring mobile and bring a better and improved experience versus anyone else? Because I think it will change absolutely every category, and the web will be longer term, will turn out to be more of a research site, kind of a harder core research experience, and mobile is going to be where you're doing stuff. You're seeing, you're viewing, you're transacting.
The point that you made about the phone becoming larger is actually the real driver.
Oh, it's really important, yeah.
Very important driver, because that makes visual merchandising viable, because in this tiny phones, visual merchandising is not very compelling, but in the larger phones with a better display quality, visual merchandising is viable.
Yeah, we're on Threadflip, they're selling $1,000 handbags and up, with mobile flips, because people, okay, this is Prada, this is beautiful, this is what I was looking for. Oh, there's another piece. I better get it now, it may not be there when I get home, right? So that's the other value of mobile, which is buy now. And so I think it is going to affect all the category. I've really come around on this over the years, especially the new form factors and beautiful screens, to think that this is where we're going to be transacting.
All right, we have just about 3 minutes of this segment left. I want to ask you to give advice to our audience on where are some opportunities to look at. Besides the trends, there's mobile, there's brand and so forth. So if you can just provide a bit more concrete pointers, that would be great.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to take the approach of look around you for the opportunity. What I mean by that, it's probably something you're already familiar with, because if you're going to win in a consumer business, you need to have a passion and a knowledge base in that category that's better and deeper than anybody else. Maybe not like classroom better, but you have an instinct on how it can be improved, and it's probably because you're experiencing either a pain or a joy in that category. I know people who start bicycle tube companies and are doing really well. It's not venture backed, but it's a really good business. They needed bicycle tubes. I'm using this because it's such a kind of unusual example, and they realized a lot of other people needed them, and they're really hard to find, really good tires and tubes, and you build these out like that. So my point is, you may find, my advice is find something that you see a gap in, something where you believe it can be improved, and then start to do it. Don't sit around and wait and write lots of different business plans. Just start, securing products, selling products, learning from your customer. And it's through that iterative cycle you're going to learn if there's a need there or not, and what people resonate to or not. And you've got to be patient, because these companies take time. There are very few overnight successes in consumer businesses. They're usually about 5 years or 10 years older than you think. And so have patience, find a category you believe strongly in, make sure there's a business model in there. I mean, the thing I hate to see is when people do well in something and there's not any margin. So make sure there's a margin in the transaction. So if you get to high volume, you've got a good business. And so that's what we think about. And then is that customer base desirable? So if you secure the trust of that customer, is there an opportunity to go other places with them? So if you sell the first thing to them, can you sell others? So we look at how often do they purchase, what's the purchase cycle in that category? So if you start to think about that when you're looking at businesses, I think that'll help guide your audience towards help filter businesses that might be more attractive than not. Again, something you can execute better than anybody else. If you do it, there's a business model. If you do it, there's a category. And if you do it, you can sell other stuff to them. That's where I'd start. And just do it and learn and then figure it out.
Great. Thank you for being with us, Todd. It was a pleasure having you.
Thanks a lot. Good luck.